The Broken Corridor. HFY Sci-Fi story. The royal flagship Celestara drifted through the darkness of space, silent and wounded. Once it was the pride of the Solari Dominion, a ship built of living metal and powered by light. Now it floated half-dead, its hull cracked, its engines whispering like dying stars. A meteor storm had struck without warning, slicing through the outer decks. Fire spread through the corridors. Alarms screamed in every language. Thousands of crew members were gone within minutes, sucked into the void or buried under twisted steel. And in the middle of the wreckage, surrounded by smoke and flickering red light, was Empress Valeria. Her silver crown was bent, her royal gown torn, and her right arm was trapped between two pieces of crushed railing. She tried to move, but the jagged metal cut deeper into her skin, drawing silver-blue blood that shimmered under the emergency lights. She was alone, her guards missing. Her ship's AI silent, her empire far away. Her voice cracked as she shouted through her comms. "Captain! Engineering?" Anyone respond? Only static answered her call. Her breathing grew fast, the scent of burning circuits filling the air. For the first time in her reign, the Empress felt fear. She looked down the corridor, its length broken and warped, wires hanging like black vines. The ship groaned again, shifting under her, and sparks fell from the ceiling. She clenched her jaw, whispering to herself, "I will not die trapped like an animal." Her efforts to free herself only made things worse, the metal tightening like a living thing. Pain spread through her arm, but she refused to scream. A Solari Empress never showed weakness, not even to death. Then she heard it. Footsteps, slow and heavy. Echoing through the smoke-filled hallway, she froze, unsure if it was friend or foe. The sound came closer, boots clanging against the steel deck, followed by a cough and a low mutter. From the shadows stepped a man in a stained gray jumpsuit. His uniform bore no royal insignia, no rank, just a small patch that read, Maintenance Division Earth. He carried a worn plasma wrench in one hand and a toolkit slung over his shoulder. His face was covered in soot, but his eyes were calm and sharp. He stopped a few meters away, taking in the scene. "Well," he said slowly, his voice steady but rough. "This doesn't look like a cleaning job." Valera's eyes widened in disbelief. You're human?" He nodded. "Yeah, ma'am, name's Mason, janitor, second class." Her pride flared instantly, even in her pain. "A janitor dares address me without bowing?" she hissed. Mason raised an eyebrow, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Lady, you're stuck in a wall. Maybe save the attitude for later." Her jaw tightened, fury mixing with confusion. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded. He knelt beside her calmly, ignoring her tone. "Judging by the crown and the fact you're not dead yet, I'd guess royalty." She glared. "I am Empress Valeria of the Solari Dominion." He gave a small nod. "Good for you, Empress. Now let's see what kind of mess we're in." He examined the rail pinning her arm, his fingers moving with quiet precision. It wasn't simple wreckage. The railing had fused with her armor and the ship's biosteel skin. "Interesting," he muttered. "The metal's reacting to your bioenergy." She frowned. "You mean it's alive?" He shrugged. "Sort of half-organic alloy. But right now it's panicking, same as you." She tried to pull again, but Mason put a firm hand on her shoulder. "Don't move," he said, his tone suddenly serious, her eyes narrowed. "You dare touch your Empress?" He cut her off. "You move, you bleed out, so please, shut up for a minute." No one had ever spoken to her like that before, but something in his voice, calm, commanding, utterly human, made her obey. He activated his plasma wrench. The blue flame casting light over her terrified face, he worked quickly, slicing through the fused metal in careful strokes, sparks flying around them. Valeria winced in pain but said nothing. The ship shuddered again, a deep groan rumbling through the hull. Mason glanced up, frowning. "That wasn't from damage." "What do you mean?" she asked. He looked around, scanning the walls. "Something's crawling inside the ship's structure." Before she could reply, a strange black liquid oozed from a crack in the ceiling. It dripped onto the floor, sizzling as it touched the deck. The smell was sharp and chemical. Mason's eyes widened. "Well, that's not coolant." The liquid spread across the floor like oil, tiny sparks of light dancing inside it. Then it started climbing, forming veins across the walls, pulsing faintly with red energy. Valera's breath caught. "What is that?" He shook his head. "Don't know yet, but if I had to guess, something we don't want to meet." He sliced through the last piece of rail and pulled her arm free. She gasped in pain, collapsing forward into his arms. He steadied her gently, wrapping a strip of cloth around the wound. "Try not to move that arm," he said softly. She looked up at him, her pride fading for the first time. "You saved me," she whispered. He nodded. "Yeah, but we're not safe yet." As they turned to leave, the ship's lights flickered again. From somewhere deep below, a low hum began to rise. The floor shook under their feet. Mason stopped, listening carefully. "That sound," he said. "That's not the reactor, that's something waking up." Valera's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" He looked over his shoulder, eyes hard and cold. "I mean, this ship's got company and it's not friendly." They both turned toward the sound of distant movement, metal scraping, doors hissing open on their own. The black veins on the walls pulsed faster, spreading toward them like roots seeking light. Mason gripped his wrench, sparks crackling at its edge. Valera whispered, "Can you stop it?" He gave a small, grim smile. "Lady, I clean messes. Not fight them, but I'll try anyway." As they ran down the smoke-filled corridor, the ship groaned like a living beast in pain. The Empress glanced back one last time, watching the black growth devour the corridor where she had been trapped, and for the first time she understood something terrifying. The ship wasn't just damaged, it was infected, and the only creature left to save her empire was a human janitor with a wrench. The hidden virus. HFY Sci-Fi story. The corridor lights flickered as Mason and the Empress moved through the smoke. Every few steps the floor vibrated under their boots, the ship groaning like something alive. The air smelled of burnt metal and ozone, and somewhere deep inside the hull that strange hum kept growing. It was not the sound of engines or machinery. It was breathing, slow and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a giant. Valera walked beside him, clutching her injured arm, trying to keep her pride even in pain. She looked at Mason and asked, "You seem calm for a man walking through death." He glanced at her and gave a half smile. "Lady, humans clean worse things than this." Her eyes narrowed. "You speak of filth as if it's honor." He shrugged. "It is when you're the one who stops it from spreading." They turned down a shattered passage lined with flickering power conduits. The black veins had spread farther than before, glowing faint red, creeping along the walls and ceiling. When the Empress brushed one with her sleeve, it pulsed like it felt her touch. Mason quickly pulled her back. "Don't touch that, it's reacting to heat." He knelt, examining the strange growth closely. Tiny mechanical spores crawled within it, like living insects made of glass. He muttered under his breath, "Nanotech." "Ancient design," Valera frowned. "You recognize it?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, this stuff is human, very old from the Terran Dark Age." Her eyes widened. "You mean your species created this abomination?" Mason stood up, face grim. "We built everything once, good and bad. This looks like one of our old nightmares." He scraped a bit of the substance into a small vial and slipped it into his toolkit. The sample twitched, hissing softly like it was alive. The ship shuddered again and red emergency lights flashed across the ceiling. A mechanical voice echoed faintly through the corridors. "Containment breach detected. Spreading contamination. Protocol failure." The voice was broken, distorted, almost like a whisper. Mason frowned. "That's your ship's AI, right?" Valera nodded slowly. "Yes, but it sounds wrong." They followed the sound into a wide chamber, one that had once been a royal promenade. Now it was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered glass. The elegant floor tiles of glowing crystal were cracked and covered with black tendrils. In the center, a cluster of the veins had grown into a pulsating cocoon of molten metal. Mason stared at it for a long moment. Valera's voice trembled. "What is that?" He whispered, "That's the source, the heart of the infection." He tapped his scanner, the readings made no sense. Numbers flickering. "It's feeding off your ship's power grid," he said quietly. "It's using your reactor as food." The Empress looked horrified. "That's impossible. Nothing can consume energy that way." Mason looked back at her with a faint smirk. "Lady, you really haven't met humans." She glared. "You take pride in destruction?" He shook his head. "No, in surviving it." He walked closer to the cocoon, every step careful. The floor under his boots sizzled slightly, heat radiating from the thing. Inside the shell, shapes moved, tendrils, metal fragments, flashes of light. Mason's expression hardened. "It's learning." Valera took a step back. "Learning what?" He looked over his shoulder. "Us," suddenly. A section of the wall split open. A wave of black fluid poured down like rain, crawling across the floor toward them. Valira stumbled, her crown falling, her royal tone breaking into panic. "It's coming alive!" Mason grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind a broken console. He pulled a small cylindrical device from his belt and slammed it onto the ground. A blue pulse exploded outward, pushing the black liquid back for a moment. The Empress gasped. "What was that?" "Ultrasonic field generator," he said. "Good for scaring rats and apparently for killing nanovirus hybrids." She blinked. "You carry weapons?" He smirked. "I carry tools, same thing when you're human," the black mass hissed. Retreating slightly, its veins writhing across the walls. The light dimmed again and the ship's AI voice whispered through the air. Broken but clear. Warning. Containment failure. Core corruption detected. Mason's eyes widened. Core corruption. That means it's inside the main reactor already. Valira stepped closer. If the core fails, the explosion will destroy everything within this sector. Mason nodded grimly. "Then we'd better stop it before your whole empire disappears." He opened a maintenance panel and accessed the ship's wiring. His hands moved fast, connecting wires, rerouting power. The Empress watched him work, fascinated by his focus. "You're just a janitor," she whispered. He didn't look up. "Yeah. And you're just a queen stuck on a dying ship. Titles don't mean much when everything's burning." Valira felt her pride twist into something new. Respect. The man who cleaned floors was now commanding the ship like a captain. She whispered softly, "Humans are strange." Mason grinned faintly. "We get that a lot." He pulled a lever and the lights in the room flickered. A holographic map appeared above them, showing the entire ship. Large red zones blinked rapidly, the infection spreading through the decks. Mason pointed at the map. "See that cluster near the engine bay?" "That's where it started," Valira frowned. "The storm." He nodded. "Yeah, the meteor impact brought something inside. But this thing, it's older than your empire." Before she could reply, a metallic shriek echoed through the corridors. The cocoon in the center of the room split open. Spraying liquid fire, a shape crawled out, tall and skeletal, its body made of writhing cables and shards of armor. Its face was smooth metal with a single red eye glowing at the center. Valira's voice broke into a whisper. "By the stars." "What is that?" Mason's voice was calm, steady, human. "That," he said, "is the reason we stopped making gods out of machines." The creature turned its head toward them. The red eye focusing like a predator's gaze, it spoke in a voice of static and steel. "New directive, consume the living." Valira froze in horror. Mason picked up his plasma wrench, the blue light reflecting in his eyes. He smiled faintly. "All right then, let's see how well you clean up." As the creature lunged forward, the ship shook violently and alarm screamed again. The Empress felt her pulse race, half in terror, half in awe. And in that moment, she finally understood why the galaxy feared Deathworlders. Because where others ran from darkness, humans walked straight into it. The core of contagion, HFY Sci-Fi story. The air in the corridor turned heavy and hot. Smoke curled around them like breath from a dying beast. The creature moved through the wreckage with slow, mechanical grace, its claws scraping sparks from the metal walls. Every sound it made vibrated through the deck plates like thunder. Mason pulled the Empress behind a sealed door and locked it. His chest heaving, he could hear the thing outside. Pacing, scanning for movement. The ship creaked as if it shared the monster's hunger. Valira clutched her wounded arm, eyes wide. "What is that thing?" Mason glanced at her. "A bad memory, one my people hope to forget," she frowned. "You mean humans created it?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, back when we were still stupid enough to think we could control fear." He leaned against the wall, wiping the sweat from his brow. "Gray rot," he said. "That's what the old archives called it. A nanotech plague designed for war. It eats energy, flesh, and memory." Her voice trembled. "You made a weapon that feeds on life?" He looked at her, his tone flat. "We made a lot of things worse than that." The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The monster outside slammed its claws into the door, metal bending under the force. Valira gasped. "It will break through." Mason's expression didn't change. "Yeah, so we'd better move." He pulled open an emergency hatch, revealing a maintenance crawl space lined with cables. "Ladies first," he said, motioning toward it. She hesitated, glaring. "An empress does not crawl." Mason smirked. "Then a dead empress can stay here." Her pride faltered. and she climbed in, muttering curses in her native tongue. The narrow tunnel was dark and cold, their breathing echoing softly behind them. The sound of tearing metal grew louder. Mason crawled faster, the light from his wrist lamp illuminating strange symbols etched into the steel. Valera whispered, "These aren't Solari markings." He nodded. "They're human. Ancient fleet code." She looked at him, confused. "But this ship was built by my ancestors." Mason's voice grew quiet. "Maybe they didn't build it from scratch." He brushed the dust away from one of the markings, revealing a faded emblem. A broken circle with a star in the center, the symbol of the United Terran Defense Fleet. Valera froze, her mind spinning. This ship, it was human? Mason nodded. "Your empire probably found it drifting centuries ago and made it your own. But the bones of this beast belong to Earth." The Empress felt a chill run through her. Her people had worshipped the Celestara as a divine creation, a symbol of their power. But now she saw the truth. It was a grave built by the same species her empire had once called savages. They reached the end of the tunnel, crawling out into a massive chamber glowing with soft blue light. Mason stood brushing off the dust, his eyes narrowing as he looked around. It was the reactor core, a towering sphere of molten light suspended by energy rings. Cables hung like roots around it, and at the base pulsed the infection, thick black tendrils feeding directly into the core's surface. Valera covered her mouth. "It's feeding from the reactor," Mason nodded grimly. "Yeah, and it's getting stronger." The ship's AI voice echoed faintly through the air, broken and fading. "Containment breach. Systems compromised. Primary reactor corruption." Mason walked closer, scanning the readings on his tool. "It's merging with the ship's main intelligence," he said. "It's trying to become the ship." Valera stepped back in horror. "It wants control?" He nodded. "No, it wants existence." The Empress shook her head. "We can't destroy the core, it powers everything." Mason stared at the swirling light, his voice low and firm. "If we don't, it'll spread beyond the ship, into the fleet, maybe across the whole sector." Valera's eyes burned with defiance. "Then we stop it without destroying it." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "You sound like someone who's never had to clean up a real mess." He walked to a control panel and began typing. The system flickered, fighting back as if aware of his touch. Data streamed across the holographic screen, human text mixed with alien code. He muttered under his breath. Someone reprogrammed the AI long ago, buried it under layers of Solari design, but the human system's still alive underneath. Valera frowned. "You can talk to it?" He nodded. "If it remembers me." He entered a series of commands. His fingers moving quickly, the lights dimmed, and a faint holographic image appeared, a flickering female figure made of light. Her voice was weak, distorted. "Unit 47, protocol failure." "Are you human?" Mason smiled faintly. "Yeah, it's me, Mason Hale, janitorial engineer, Terran Fleet." The AI hesitated as if remembering something long forgotten. "Maintenance division. Authorization accepted." "Warning, entity consuming memory core," Mason nodded. "I can see that, sweetheart." He turned to the Empress. "She's alive." "But barely." Valera stepped forward, awe in her eyes. "You speak to machines like they are people," she said softly. He looked at her. "We built them to think, so we treated them like family, until one of them decided to treat us like waste." Her expression softened. "I see now why your kind fears what it creates." The AI's voice returned, weaker this time. "Containment possible, but requires neural link. Human interface needed," Mason frowned. "Neural link? That'll burn my brain out." The Empress spoke quickly. "Then let me—" He cut her off, shaking his head. "No offense, but you're not built for this kind of pain." He placed his hand on the console. Blue light wrapped around his arm, energy crawling up to his neck. Valera's voice broke. "You'll die." He smiled faintly. "Lady, dying's easy. Keeping things alive, that's hard." The AI's voice grew louder. "Connection established. Containment in progress." Pain shot through him, his eyes glowing faintly blue. The veins of black nanotech pulsed wildly. Reacting to his resistance, sparks flew, the chamber roaring with energy. Valera screamed his name, reaching for him. "Mason!" Through the blinding light he shouted, "Get to the control node! Cut off the secondary feed." She hesitated. "I don't know how." He gritted his teeth. "You're an Empress. Start learning." Valera ran across the platform, pulling levers and slamming panels open, her elegant gown torn and burned. The ground shook violently as the reactor core's energy shifted. The black infection began to shriek. A sound that wasn't sound but pain given form. She yelled, "Now what?" He shouted back, "Pull the red handle." She blinked. "They're all red." He groaned. Figures. Then somehow, she closed her eyes, trusting instinct instead of logic. Her hands moved across the controls, feeling the pulse of the ship. And with one hard pull, the lights flared. The infection screamed one last time and dissolved into ash. The reactor dimmed to a calm blue glow. Silence fell. Mason collapsed to one knee, smoke rising from his suit. Valera rushed to him, holding his shoulders. His voice was weak but steady. "Told you. Cleaning's dangerous work," she stared at him, half angry, half awed. "You insane, stubborn human." He smiled faintly. "Best kind." And as the reactor hummed softly again, Valera looked around the glowing chamber, realizing what had just happened. A human janitor had just saved her ship, her empire, and maybe the galaxy. And he had done it with a wrench, a mind full of scars, and a courage no machine could ever replicate. The choice of the Empress. HFY Sci-Fi story. The reactor chamber was quiet after the storm. Blue light flickered gently on the walls, glowing across twisted metal and pools of silver dust. The air was heavy with the smell of burned circuits and ozone. Mason knelt near the control console, breathing hard, his hands shaking. The Empress stood over him, her face pale but her eyes bright with something new, something like respect. "You saved the ship," she whispered. Her voice trembling with awe. Mason gave a tired smile. "Yeah, for now." He looked at the flickering holographic core above them, half blue, half black. The infection was dying but not gone. Thin tendrils of darkness still pulsed faintly inside the light. Like veins under skin, the AI's voice broke the silence. "Containment incomplete. Energy corruption spreading. Data core infected." Mason frowned. "That means it's in the archive, right?" Valera nodded slowly. "Yes, all Solari memory, all our history. Everything my people have built for 1,000 years," he sighed. "Figures." The holographic interface glowed red. The AI spoke again. "Containment protocol requires data purge. Confirm deletion of memory archives." Mason looked up sharply. "If we purge it, what happens?" The AI replied, "Corruption erased. Ship saved. Solari memory erased." Valera's face went pale, her voice a whisper. "That means destroying my people's soul." She stepped closer, eyes locked on the holographic terminal. Inside it shimmered images of her ancestors, her battles, her empire's rise. Every story, every voice stored inside the ship's mind. To destroy it would be like burning the stars themselves. She turned toward Mason, her voice breaking. "You ask me to erase everything we are." Mason leaned back against the wall, exhausted but calm. "I'm not asking," he said softly. "I'm telling you the truth. You can save your people, or you can save their ghosts." Valera stared at him, tears shining in her eyes. "You can't understand what that means." He gave a tired smile. "Lady, I come from a world that almost killed itself 12 times. We learned to rebuild from ashes. It's kind of our thing." She looked at him, searching for some other answer. "Is there no other way?" she whispered. He shook his head. "Sometimes mercy and destruction are the same thing." Her hands trembled as she approached the console. She could hear the whispers of her ancestors echoing through the data. Thousands of voices begging to be remembered. Her people had built the Dominion to conquer death, to leave behind eternal memory, and now a human janitor was asking her to let it go. She looked at Mason. "If I do this, my people will curse my name." He nodded. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll live long enough to forgive you." She closed her eyes, tears falling silently. Then she whispered, "I am Empress of the Solari Dominion. My duty is to life, not pride." She pressed her palm to the console. The AI's voice grew calm, almost gentle. "Command accepted. Data purge initiated." A bright white light filled the room. The sound of rushing wind, the hum of dying circuits. Images flashed, memories, faces, songs, all dissolving into light and vanishing. The Empress fell to her knees, her heart breaking as her history turned to nothing. Mason caught her before she hit the ground. She looked up at him, tears streaming. "It's gone." He nodded quietly. "Yeah, but you're still here," she whispered. "My ancestors, they are dust," he said softly. "Then make new ones. Better ones. Ones who remember how to live. The light dimmed slowly, leaving only the soft hum of the reactor. The AI's voice returned. Weaker now, but peaceful. Corruption removed. System stable. Farewell, Empress Valira. Farewell, human. The core faded to blue, silent once more. Valira stood slowly. Her royal gown burned and torn, her face streaked with tears. She looked around the empty chamber that had once held her empire's soul. Mason reached into his toolkit and handed her a small data crystal. Here, he said. What's left of your AI's voice? I saved a fragment. She took it carefully, her hands trembling. Why? He smiled faintly. Because even when you clean up a mess, you don't throw everything away. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the slow hum of life returning to the ship. Then Valira whispered, You humans, you destroy but you save. Mason looked at her. We try, one mess at a time. A distant boom echoed through the hull, shaking the floor beneath them. Valira turned. What was that? Mason scanned the readings, his eyes narrowing. Reinforcements, he said. Your fleet just showed up and they're angry. Her eyes widened. They think I'm dead. He nodded. Then maybe it's time you showed them what life looks like. She stood tall again, wiping her tears, straightening her crown. Her voice was steady now, full of quiet power. Then let them see their empress rise from the ashes, she said. Mason smirked. Now that's the spirit. As the ship's systems came back online, the stars outside glowed brighter. The empress and the janitor stood side by side, surrounded by the hum of reborn power. Two souls from different worlds. One who ruled with pride, and one who cleaned with courage, and in that moment, even the galaxy itself seemed to pause because sometimes, the greatest salvation comes from the hands no one ever noticed. The promise of the janitor. HFY Sci-Fi story. The stars outside the viewport burned bright and calm again. The Celestera floated through open space like a wounded giant that refused to die. Scars lined her hull, but her heart still beat. Inside the control deck, Mason stood beside the Empress. Both silent as the last systems came back online. Blue light washed over their faces, painting them in peace after chaos. Valira looked at the human beside her, the man who had come from nowhere, who had saved everything she once thought only gods could protect. You gave me back my people, she said softly, and took their ghosts away. Mason smiled faintly. Ghosts make bad company anyway. The console blinked with new signals. Outside, the Solari fleet was approaching fast. Dozens of ships shimmering with light, their weapons still warm. Their crews desperate for orders. They think you're dead, Mason said quietly. Valira nodded. Then they will see their Empress reborn. She stepped forward, straightened her damaged crown, and opened a channel to her fleet. Her voice rang across every ship, every frequency. My people, your Empress speaks, the darkness is gone. But it was not royal blood that saved you. It was human hands, a man of earth. One who cleans and mends, who fought when all others ran. Her words echoed like fire through the airwaves. Remember this day. Remember the hands that repair what pride destroys. The comms fell silent for a heartbeat. Then the entire fleet answered as one, a deep echoing salute. The sound of thousands of Solari voices repeating one word. Human. Mason scratched his neck. Embarrassed. Guess that's new. Valira turned to him, a small smile curving her lips. You've become legend. Mason of Earth, he laughed quietly. Legends are just stories people make up because they don't like the truth. She tilted her head. And what is the truth? He looked at her with tired eyes. That I just did my job. She stepped closer, her tone gentle. No, you reminded me what that job means. The ship trembled slightly as repair drones began sealing the hull, beams of silver light patching the scars. Mason watched them for a moment, then started packing his worn-out toolkit. You're leaving? She asked almost softly. He nodded. Maintenance call on Deck 9. Toilet still broken? Valira blinked, half in disbelief, half in admiration. You saved an empire and still think of cleaning pipes, she said. He shrugged. Empire or toilet? Both smell bad if you don't fix them. She laughed for the first time in her life, a sound light and real. Your people must be impossible, she said. He grinned. That's why we're still alive. The hangar doors opened, revealing the black sea of space beyond. Mason climbed into his small shuttle. Old, scratched, and barely holding together, Valira watched him from the deck, her eyes reflecting the stars. You will return to your world? she asked. He looked back at her. World's big, universe bigger. Someone's got to keep it clean before closing the hatch. He paused, his tone soft. Take care of that ship, Majesty. And remember, machines don't rule hearts. People do. The shuttle engines roared to life, dust swirling around him. He saluted her with 2 fingers and disappeared into the darkness. The Empress stood long after he was gone, staring at the stars. In her hand she held the small data crystal he had given her. She activated it once more, and a faint human voice echoed from within, the old ship's AI whispering softly. Protocol complete. Thank you for remembering Mercy. She smiled faintly, whispering, thank him, not me. Days later, as the Celestara returned to the Solari homeworld, stories had already begun to spread. They said the human Deathworlder had faced the rot of machines and lived. They said a janitor had saved an empress, and somewhere in the void, the man himself floated quietly through the stars, humming an old Earth tune, his hands covered in grease, his heart steady. He didn't seek glory, he didn't seek reward, he simply moved on, fixing the next broken thing in a universe that never stayed clean. And across the Solari Dominion, a new phrase entered their language. Whenever someone did something brave, something kind, something impossible, they said, he worked like a human.